They found it, lying silent. At the bottom of the ocean, a warship, sealed shut for over 80 years. No one dared to open it, not because they couldn't, but because of what they feared was inside. Then one morning, a team of scientists descended into the deep, cracked open the rusted iron hull, and what they discovered made grown men go completely silent. Governments were notified immediately. Private investors started making calls. Within hours, and the world's most powerful institutions began quietly repositioning. Before the public knew anything, what was inside that warship is about to change something. You thought it was already decided. Welcome to Deep Wave Discovery, where the deep ocean does not keep secrets forever. Now, before we go any further, if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, think of it this way: you would not walk out of a book halfway through the most important chapter of your life. So do not leave this channel without pressing that subscribe button. Think of it like locking your front door at night. It takes 1 second, but it protects everything that matters. And one more thing, drop a comment right now and tell the team where in the world are you watching this from today. Whether it is a quiet town or a busy city, let them know. The Deep Wave community is global, and every voice matters. For more than 8 decades, it sat undisturbed. Somewhere beneath the cold, dark surface of the Pacific Ocean, a World War II rewrote warship rested in silence, a steel tomb that the world had agreed without a single public vote to leave alone. Its name was known to historians. Its location was tracked by naval authorities, and yet, for reasons that were never fully explained to the public, no serious attempt had been made to open it, until now. In early 2024, a joint team of marine scientists, deep-sea engineers, and government-appointed observers finally descended to the wreck site. Their mission was described officially as a historical preservation assessment. But those within the research community who were briefed beforehand understood it differently. This was not about preservation. This was about inventory. The warship in question had been part of a critical supply convoy during the final years of World War II. It was transporting cargo, the precise nature of which had been classified for decades under wartime documentation laws. When the ship went down, it did not sink because of enemy fire. The official record listed the cause as mechanical failure and navigational error. Investigators at the time closed the case within 11 days. 11 days for a warship carrying unknown classified cargo. In the middle of a world war, that detail alone had quietly fascinated a small circle of researchers, economists, and independent historians for years. But without access, without funding, and without political clearance, curiosity remained just that. Curiosity was not technology. Deep-sea exploration had been capable of reaching this wreck for at least 15 years. What changed was permission. And when governments grant permission for something they previously withheld, serious analysts do not ask what was found. They ask why now. Because timing, in economics as in history, is never accidental. The team reached the hull at approximately 1,400 meters below the surface. Cameras were rolling. Data was being transmitted to 3 separate government servers simultaneously. And when the cutting equipment finally broke through the main cargo hold door, the lead scientist stopped speaking mid-sentence. The feed went quiet for 6 full seconds. And then came the words that would trigger a chain of events stretching from research laboratories to private equity boardrooms across 4 continents. This was not supposed to still be here. The silence lasted only 6 seconds. But in those 6 seconds, 80 years of assumption collapsed. What the team discovered inside that cargo hold was not wreckage. It was not scattered debris. It was not the deteriorated remains of standard wartime supplies. It was organized, carefully stacked, deliberately arranged, and in a condition that defied every expectation of what saltwater and time do to sealed. Metal containers at 1,400 meters below the surface. The cargo manifest, the original wartime document that had been sitting in a classified naval archive since. 1944 listed the contents as industrial equipment and field rations. Standard language, unremarkable on paper. The kind of description designed to make a reader's eyes move on without stopping. But what the cameras captured told an entirely different story. The containers bore markings from 3 separate nations, not just the United States, not just its direct wartime allies. The third set of markings belonged to a country that, in 1944, was officially considered a neutral party in the conflict. That single detail, 3 sets of national markings on cargo inside a classified American warship, rewrote the political context of the entire discovery in one moment. Analysts who reviewed the footage in the days that followed were not asking historical questions. They were asking economic ones. Because inside those containers were raw materials, specifically, refined deposits of strategic metals, including early processed compounds that modern industry now classifies as critical minerals. The same category of materials that today sits at the center of semiconductor manufacturing, battery technology, and advanced defense systems. In 2024 currency and market terms, the estimated value of recoverable material from that single cargo hold was quietly assessed by 2 independent financial consultancies, neither of which published their findings publicly, at figures that began with a B, not millions, billions. And here is where the story stops being about history entirely. The world is currently in the middle of a critical minerals crisis. Governments are spending hundreds of billions of dollars attempting to secure supply chains for the exact category of materials found in that cargo hold. Trade wars are being fought over them. Entire foreign policy strategies are being restructured around them. And somehow, beneath 1,400 meters of ocean water, an undisturbed supply had been waiting. What the scientists opened was not a warship. 'Twas an unscheduled entry into the most contested resource market on the planet. And the institutions that were notified first did not call historians. They called lawyers. Within 72 hours of the cargo hold footage reaching secured government servers, 3 things happened simultaneously. A little-known maritime salvage clause buried inside a 2019 international naval treaty was quietly cited in formal correspondence between 2 Pacific region governments. A private equity firm headquartered in Singapore filed preliminary documentation with an offshore admiralty court. And a senior official from a G7 nation's Department of Strategic Resources boarded a flight that was not listed on any public travel record. None of these events made the news. All of them were connected. This is how resource control actually works, not through dramatic public announcements, but through the precise, unhurried movement of people who already know what is coming before the rest of the world finishes reading the headline. The warship, by international maritime law, existed in a complicated legal space. It was a vessel of a sovereign nation, which technically granted that nation protective jurisdiction over the wreck. But the cargo, particularly cargo bearing the markings of a third neutral nation, introduced a layer of ownership ambiguity that no existing treaty had cleanly resolved. In simple terms, nobody fully owned it. And in the world of high-stakes resource acquisition, nobody fully owns it does not mean it belongs to everyone. It means it belongs to whoever moves first. Within 2 weeks, 4 separate legal claims had been filed across 3 different jurisdictions. The language in each filing was careful, technical, and deliberately slow-moving, because speed and legal strategy often signals desperation. These players were not desperate. They were methodical. 1 claim came from a government body. 2 came from private salvage consortiums with documented ties to larger institutional investment groups. The 4th, and most quietly significant, came from a small, relatively unknown maritime heritage organization that had been incorporated just 19 months earlier. Researchers who tracked the founding documents of that organization found something worth noting. Its board of directors included 3 individuals who had previously held senior positions in critical minerals procurement for 3 different governments. This was not a heritage organization. It was a holding structure. And this is the business lesson that young entrepreneurs and serious decision-makers must engrave into their strategic thinking permanently. By the time a valuable discovery becomes public knowledge, the architecture of control around it is already being built. The scientists opened the warship, but the real operation had begun long before the cutting equipment touched the hull. Because the most important question was never what was inside the ship, it was who had already known it was there, and had spent years positioning themselves to be first in line. The moment the world was finally allowed to look, power does not react to opportunity. Power prepares for it, quietly, patiently, and always. Several moves ahead. The warship is no longer the story. It never really was. What happened at 1,400 meters below the Pacific surface was simply the moment the curtain moved, just enough for those paying close attention to see what had always been standing behind it. And what was standing behind it was this. The world's most significant economic opportunities are almost never discovered. They are uncovered. And there is a profound difference between the two. Discovery implies accident, luck, being in the right place at the right time. It is the version of success that gets told at dinner tables and posted on social media, clean, dramatic, and deeply misleading. Uncovering is something else entirely. It is the result of patient research, uncomfortable questions, and the willingness to study what everyone else has agreed, without evidence, to stop looking at. The institutions that moved within 72 hours of that footage did not move fast because they were reactive. They moved fast because they had already done the slow work years earlier. The legal structures were pre-built. The relationships were pre-established. The capital was pre-positioned. They were not responding to the discovery. They were executing a plan. This is the economic warning that every serious entrepreneur, every aspiring business leader, and every young person building their first venture needs to absorb completely. The next great resource shift, whether in critical minerals, artificial intelligence, infrastructure, water rights, agricultural land, or decentralized financial systems, will not announce itself. It will not arrive with a press release or a trending headline. It will surface quietly, the way that warships surfaced, already surrounded by people who knew it was coming. The question is never, will an opportunity emerge? Opportunities are always emerging, constantly, in every sector, in every market, at every level of capital. The only question that separates those who build lasting wealth from those who read about it afterward, is whether the groundwork has already been laid before the moment arrives. Study the industries that powerful institutions are quietly entering, not loudly celebrating. Watch where old legal frameworks are being slowly rewritten, not dramatically overhauled. Pay attention to the organizations being incorporated today, not the ones making headlines tomorrow. Because somewhere, right now, in a jurisdiction that most people cannot locate on a map, a document is being filed. A position is being taken. A structure is being built. And by the time the rest of the world opens the cargo hold, the serious players will already be on their way back to the surface. The warship waited 80 years to be opened. The real lesson was never inside the hull. It was in understanding who had the key and how long they had been holding it. This has been Deep Wave Discovery. If this briefing gave you something to think about, the subscribe button is still waiting. One click, like locking that front door. It only takes a second.